Hello, health seekers. Welcome to another episode of the Keto Pro Podcast with myself, Richard Smith. Today, I'm joined by a returning guest, someone who needs no introduction, my good friend, Jen Unwin. Jen, welcome back on board.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy, I'm sure at the end of this chat, I'll have had a really interesting time. So it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Fantastic. And always exciting and brilliant to chat. It's, you and I were going to do this call with David and another good friend of mine, Ankur, in regards to cholesterol, but we'll park the main part of that for another call, I think, because we can get into cholesterol anyway, and I think we'll bounce some bits back and forth. But yeah, keep an eye out for that one because I think that'll be a fantastic podcast coming up. But Jen, brilliant to catch up again. It's been quite some time since our last recording.
Yeah, and there's always new stuff. I was thinking about coming on and I was thinking, gosh, there's so many interesting things to talk about, like mitochondria. I'm quite interested in those at the minute, and all this new stuff that's coming out about keto and mental health. I think it's fantastic. There's all the new, it's not new, is it? But I think there's a lot more interest in the cholesterol, and particularly those of us that get this high cholesterol response to doing keto. So I think that's super interesting. The food addiction stuff, of course, I could talk about all day long. And that's really gathering speed. So it's kind of exciting times, I think. And I think there's just a lot more interest in ketogenic diets, carnivore diets. That's such a sort of point of interest, I think, and discussion and debate at the moment, that I think so many more people are hearing about it, hearing about the benefits. So it's all good.
Yeah, it's shocked me recently, speaking with people about low carb, ketogenic based lifestyles. I mean, when I began my journey and I was speaking with people about ketogenic lifestyles, I'd be lucky if one person in 100 had ever heard of the word, ketogenic. Now, I think in fact, I haven't met somebody or anybody recently who is not at least familiar with the term, ketogenic and carnivore. I mean, this seems to be, I think, probably more popular recently than even the term keto, even though, I don't know about you, Jen, but what I don't teach keto. I don't teach carnivore. What I've been explaining to people recently is I teach real nutrition. It just so happens that real nutrition comes from animal proteins and natural fats, and by default, we're ketogenic and more animal based, but it's certainly growing. It's certainly growing.
Yeah, I think it's that real food message, I think, isn't it? And, essentially what happens then is that people start moving into a better metabolic, I think that's something we can all get behind. Ultra processed foods are bad for you. I don't think it's one or two people in the industry, obviously, that have I've recently had a go at quite a bit by a certain person, but that's bound to happen, isn't it? But I think the vast majority of people can get behind this real food message. This ultra processed foods are bad for you. I think it's another message that's really getting through, thanks to people like Chris Van Sullivan. I think that's just sort of, yes, people sort of understand that now. I think it's just more about how can they do that in their daily lives, and particularly if they're living in places where the availability of real whole foods locally produced is lacking. It really, that takes us into that realm of, we need to be campaigning, we need to get sort of political, the small p, about our food environment, really. And I think that's what happens, isn't it, is that when you've been living like this and the difference it makes, you've seen the research, you're in that space of understanding the massive difference it makes to people's physical and mental health to have that quality food as nature intended, as we evolved to eat. You start to want to sort of have that for everybody, and you look around and you can't believe the state of our food supply and what kids are eating. So you get a little bit kind of riled up, but that's all good. Keeps us busy.
It does, but it's very frustrating. But you're exactly right. I mean, if I look back at my journey, it began with removing bread, and then it was more gravitating towards low carb, then a dirty keto lifestyle, then a standard keto lifestyle, then a strict keto lifestyle, and then more animal based, and eventually, what I would call as being carnivore, and now strict carnivore. So it's come through a series of incremental changes, but what we teach is real nutrition. And as you say, I think everyone knows processed foods are not good. So I mean that's an easy box to tick. Let's just drop the processed foods. And then if we start to focus on real foods, so even if you are consuming vegetables, then obviously meat and vegetables. But then, what I tend to teach people beyond that is how damaging grains can be. I believe it to be one of two huge pillars or big levers that we can pull. And I think if we can remove or reduce grains and seed oils, then anyone is going to see an improvement in health and well-being. It seems to be the grains in particular, the single biggest lever to pull, because everybody I was speaking with someone this morning. So the reason that I had to bump the call back late, apologies. I train every Wednesday with a good friend of mine, Mikey Davis, and he is a triathlete. He's an Ironman champion. So he's European champion in Ironman and the Welsh record holder in the World Championships. So this is the person I train with every Wednesday. I try to do his workout as much as I can. Anyway, we had a friend of his join us today, and we were talking about, and this guy is super fit, and we were speaking about real food, and his diet was clean. And he was saying, I eat a very clean, healthy diet. So he doesn't eat processed foods, but he eats lots of grains and lots of vegetables. And he was complaining of gastro distress and IBS and gut issues. So the simple thing is that grains are a huge contributing factor to this. It's the fructans break down into fructose, and through fructose malabsorption, it leads to these gastro issues. There are plenty of other factors in regards to the glyphosate, which blocks the shikimate pathway, in particular PEP, phospholinopyruvate, which is the output of fructose absorption and digestion. So it leads to this fructose buildup. But I don't know. I've parted these words of wisdom. I'm hoping that they haven't fallen on deaf ears, but you can see the second that you mentioned that maybe, your morning oats or your muesli isn't too beneficial, you almost see people just switch off at a drop of a hat, at a click of a
yeah, they don't want to give those things up. I think yeah, I mean I was going to say ingrained, and then I realized that was kind of a bit of a pun.
Pun intended.
Pun intended. Literally, since childhood, we had it so drilled into us, didn't we, that slow release carbohydrates, have your porridge in the morning, your ready break, and you're kind of full up all morning, all that nonsense, which is completely untrue, actually. You never were full up all morning. I was just hungry by 10:30. That, yeah, and grains are good for you. It's so drilled into us, and really kind of where's the evidence for that? And also modern, particularly the wheat and so on, it's not as it was, it's not as nature intended, because it's been so manipulated. Like fruits and vegetables, when you look at how they were originally and how many of them you'd have found. I mean, that's the thing. People say, oh, well, we ate fruit and vegetables. Well, yeah, but I mean, when we ate fruit in that little window when it was available, and here in the north of Europe, what was it? Little tiny bits of thing. We weren't cultivating wheat, and if we were, it was those old, very short. They were kind of. I heard a fantastic talk once by a guy who'd looked into all the kind of history of wheat, and he'd gone up on the roofs of thatched houses, ancient thatched houses, and been retrieving bits of grain from sort of 400 years ago. And it's nothing like the stuff we have now that's so long and with hardly any roots, and it's been genetically modified so that there's more there's basically more gluten in it, isn't there? So, it's not what we were eating. It's not what we evolved over millennia to eat high volumes of fruit and vegetables where, it wasn't there. Carrots, onions, if we found a few little bits of root, we would probably kind of felt happy about that, but not in the volume that we get nowadays. I think people forget that our modern diet is nothing like how we would have eaten. Fatty meat was the thing, and everywhere that humans went, they ate to extinction the large fatty whatever was roaming the plains. We just ended up eating the mammoths and all of those delicious things that we evolved to eat, and they don't exist now.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's an important point because, we do look at fruits and vegetables as being natural, but they're not what they once were. I did a post recently, which was, it was a snippet from a recording that I did with Dr. Abs in London. And, we discussed this. We went into fruits and vegetables and how fruits, for a start in the UK, would have been crab apples and little tiny berries, not these huge things that we see
September.
today.
In August,
Exactly.
September, not now. Now we wouldn't have been, well, we'd have been pretty thin by now, wouldn't we? we were definitely looking for rabbits and deer and all kinds of things like that at this time of year because there was nothing else to eat.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's these fruits come into season at the end of the summer in order to fatten us up for a cold winter, but they weren't available all year round. They certainly weren't flown in from another country. Our DNA is not barcoded for fruits from foreign countries.
Morocco, yeah, exactly.
And a lot of people don't understand this. That it's just because it's fruit, then it must be okay. And the vegetables, not what they once were. The carrots, used to be purple. They're not what they once were. These vegetables, they didn't resemble anything that the way that they look today. They were very small. They didn't taste very nice. Even the fruit was quite sour. So they're not things that we would have eaten in excess. And we are carnivore. In fact, we're hyper carnivore, which means that we didn't just consume other animal proteins. We consumed other predators. And we know this from nitrogen isotope testing that for at least 3.4 million years that we've predominated animal proteins. Whenever animal proteins were available, that's what we've consumed. These other foods were nothing more than survival foods.
Yeah. Absolutely. It must have been a really small proportion of what we ate at certain times of year. And I often think actually the same with eggs. I love eggs, actually. I had to go through a phase of not eating them, but I'm back on them now. Love them. Probably have a couple every day. But they were seasonal too. It wasn't normal to eat four eggs a day, which a lot of us, in this space will now. Eggs were seasonal, and we didn't have chickens. There would have just been seabird eggs or whatever it is. So I often try and think in those evolutionary terms, both in sort of the nutrition side, but also the sort of psychology side of well-being, and how as much as we can in our modern life, we need to try and think about that and get back to it. So all kinds of things that are evidence, like daylight for that circadian rhythm, getting outside, lots of movement, the food we eat, which is what we've been thinking about, being part of a community, those sort of connections and connecting to your family and community. I think all of that kind of comes together to make a happy. If you're keeping a human, David often says, if you're keeping a human in a zoo, how would you keep it really healthy? And it's all of that stuff, isn't it, that the way that sort of we evolved to live, and modern lifestyles really get in the way of all of those things. I've got interested in mitochondria and red light because there's some really compelling evidence about red light and mitochondria, and that's all about being outside and getting that full spectrum light instead of this kind of blue light that when we're living indoors all the time. And how do you keep your mitochondria happy? That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the key to everything. It's yeah, for sure. And you're right. I think they all connected. If we look at the blue zones, for example, we're told that these centenarians live so long because they consume a plant-based lifestyle. But the data shows the opposite. In fact, their lifestyles predominate animal proteins. I think Okinawa, one of the largest consumers of pork in the world.
Yes, I love pork.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially wild pork.
Yeah.
So these things they quite often go out the window when we look at the real data. But part of what all of these peoples have is their community. So I think that is incredibly important. They have solid community base, and it's that connection, isn't it? And these are things that we lack in modern day. We're stuck in boxes. We work in our box all day. We have very little interaction with people, at least face to face. I speak to people all day via Zoom, which is fantastic, but it's not the same.
So yeah.
It's not the same, and it's I've mentioned a few times in podcasting recently that I rent 4 offices, and most of the time I'm here by myself. And sometimes you just want somebody just to be working on the desk over there. I don't even have to speak to them, but it's just having that human interaction, because we are designed excuse me, we are designed that way.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
in the same way.
how we evolved, how we survived was those connections, those kind of shared goals is hugely important. What are we, what's the tribe trying to sort of achieve, and how they're keeping each other safe, and yeah,
it's that community, isn't it? Which I think modern technology, which is fantastic, I think takes an awful lot away from those connections. My little girl is 10, and I introduced her to an iPad when she was quite young, and it was a fantastic tool in order to teach her simple things, the alphabet, simple maths and so on, and problem solving. And it has been an integral tool, but now it just seems to be this void that just, when they are using their iPads or their mobile phones, they just disappear into this fake world. Children don't go out to play anymore.
It's a really difficult thing to negotiate that, isn't it? So we've got 7 grandkids now, and it's a difficult balance, because they need to live in the real world. They need to learn how to use a computer and all of that, but you definitely want them to interact with the real world and to have that as well.
Yeah, and it's a very tough thing for me, being who I am and what I do. I find it difficult when it comes to the nutrition for my little girl. If I had my way, she would be carnivore. But there are a few things going on. There are external factors. I'm not the only person that has a say in what she eats. When she's over her nan's, for example, I don't control what her nan feeds her. And she's kind enough to look after her, when I'm working and things. So it's one of those, you can ask, but then meat is more expensive than the foods that. So it doesn't have to be, by the way, but and we can get into this also. But it's difficult. There are lots of contributing factors on there, but it.
Yeah. I think the main thing is that we just, you just try and live by example, which you're doing. And as they get a bit older, so our oldest one is 13, and they have had, actually, obviously our daughters bringing them up, they have had very clean diets. They do eat a lot of meat and eggs and fish and all of that stuff. The 13-year-old, in a way, fortunately, although she doesn't always see it this way, is very sensitive to gluten, particularly any processed food, any sugar. She just feels unwell and her skin all breaks out. So she's very motivated at 13 to stay, because we just point out, well, that's because, you were eating sweets with your friends. And she says, I know that's the case. And it means that she's motivated to try not to do that. But it is incredibly difficult for them. And the young people, particularly, the nutrition is is awful. And like you and I, like that's how we grew up, wasn't it? And that was my problem really, was that I just absolutely loved all of that, all of those foods. And yeah, but here we are. Here we
Yeah,
are.
it's an addiction. It's a drug, isn't it? You know, which is why you do what you do. But
Yep.
yeah, I find it very difficult. I want my little girl to make her own decisions. So I don't want to force her into a specific way of living. I want her to make her own mind up. But it's difficult when there are lots of external factors going on, you know, when she's over a friend's house, even when she's in school. You know, I've had conversations with the school and the food that they make, and it's not even food, and it's heartbreaking. But it's, you know, and I have this conversation with lots of parents within our community. How do we, you know, address this addiction? Because it is an addiction also. You know, the kids don't want to give up their grains because it's not just the sugar.
Yeah.
The gluteomorphine is highly addictive. You know, it's an addictive compound, and we're addicted to these things without even knowing. So it's, you know, you can be addicted to your sweets, but you can also be addicted to your muesli, you know?
Yes, exactly. And then, yeah, like we were saying before, that's why people don't want to give it up. It seems it seems too much of an ask. And so they, you know, don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that information. I think the only way with anybody is, you know, if they'll just give it a try, then they can see. And like we said at the top, you stepwise get those benefits, the more of it you do. And I think people soon get that. If they'll just give it a week even, they'll
Yeah.
notice. And then when they go back to it, they feel worse. And, you know, this is how we try and work with the patients in the practice, in that nobody starts off and sticks to it 100%. They don't. They always wobble and have a go and see, and you know, they'll have a go and they feel better. But even though we feel better, you know, that Christmas comes around or it's somebody's birthday and you think, oh, I've done so well, or, you know, I'll have my packet of Doritos or whatever it is. But, you know, usually what happens is that people then do feel worse. The cravings come back, you know, they get brain foggy, sluggish, skin breaks out, whatever it is, the gut problems. And, you know, so hopefully they'll kind of reset. So I think that truth that people experience is the most powerful thing. If they'll just, like, if this guy at the gym will just give it a go, he's probably going to be great in a week or two. It happens quite quickly, doesn't it? Your bowels,
Very quick.
whatever it is, the cravings, you know, yeah, if people just give it a week, I think they'll.
Yeah, 100%. There's another gentleman that I was working with recently, a friend of Mikey. He suffered with ulcerative colitis for the last 17 years. Give him all the information, didn't really buy into it. So it was a case of, look, just try it. Just try it for 2 weeks to prove me wrong. Spoke to him 2 weeks later. Everything had cleared up. 17 years of suffering with this condition and cleared up within a week or two. And I think he said that he saw massive improvements within 2 days.
Yeah.
And that's how quick.
Skin and your guts, that's turning over really fast. You're remaking all of that, all of those cells, you know, really, really quickly. So yeah, like blood, that's why, you know, they do the blood tests for diabetes every 3 months, because your blood cells are turning over every 3 months or so. So yeah, you can be a whole new person really, really quickly. And that's why we need to eat all those proteins, amino acids, animal fats, because we're remaking ourselves. Is there some sort of, I don't know if it's right, but I'd heard that every 10 years you're literally remade, your bones, everything. Yeah, and your brain, and every cell is sort of, you know, because cells are dying off all the time and, you know, being remade, obviously. Yeah, so you can, and I mean the stuff that you see on social media in our kind of space. I'm following a woman called Mimi on Twitter, on X, and at 60 she had Parkinson, she'd had a stroke, she was in a wheelchair, she puts photos of herself. She looked awful. She was on loads of medication. And anyway, long story short, she's now 70 and she just looks amazing. She does the gym. She's got no Parkinson's symptoms at all. She's got over this stroke. She exercises, you know, she lifts weights. And she just looks absolutely amazing. She's basically carnivore. I think she's sort of moved in that direction. Yeah. So in 10 years, she's sort of basically remade herself utterly. And you see stuff like that all the time. And it you know, can sound a bit boring, can't we? That, you know, this way of life can cure so many conditions. But when you've seen it, I mean, David sees it all the time. You know, he's putting people with type 2 diabetes into remission on a daily basis. But it's not just that. You know, it's people losing huge amounts of weight like you did. People, skin problems. And all this latest stuff about mental health, I think, is really exciting. I think there's going to be this sort of revolution around, you know, psychiatric conditions and managing them with a metabolic health approach. Chris Palmer, Georgia Ede, and just yesterday, Ian Campbell, who's up in Edinburgh, has published that paper on. They did a pilot study for people with bipolar type 2, and everybody was able to stick to it. You know, there's all this business, isn't there? Oh, no one's going to stick to that. Well, if you've had ulcerative colitis for 17 years, or you've got Parkinson's, or you've got bipolar disorder, you know, you're really motivated. That's not a life. You know, people are really motivated. If it's a treatment that works, they're really motivated to stick to it, and they do. Like our patients, David's patients, they sometimes struggle, but on the whole, they stick to it because they feel so much better. They're off all these medications. I think the whole mental health stuff at the minute is really exciting.
It's huge. It's one of the things that I presented on Keto Brain Health last year. Fortunate enough to share the stage with our good friend Zoe Harcoom, Ivor Cummins, and Dr. Chafee and Rachel Brown. And it was to do with how ketones can help with brain health.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, the presentation's available. I'll pop a link below for those who want to watch it in full. But it, you know, when we look into the glutamate and GABA ratio and how the body creates neurotransmitters, it's there in black and white. I used to suffer with severe anxiety and depression. And now, you know, I'm speaking to your good self. I do these talks on stage. I would not have dreamt of doing those things for £1 million, because my anxiety and depression were too debilitating, to the point I could barely leave my house. I won't bore the listeners with my story because they've heard it about 1 million times. But you know, it's what we eat.
I mean, it's transformative, isn't it? And you know, why would you not stick to it? Why wouldn't you kind of try and help other people, which is what you're doing? And you know, it's once you've seen it, you can't see it, and you actually get kind of mad about it, because you know, I was about 50 when I discovered. No, I was a bit younger than that but anyway, you know, I wasn't a young person, and I just wish that I'd known all of this stuff back in the day, because I think you do, even though we can reverse a lot of things, obviously we have harmed our metabolism because of how we ate and how sensitive we were to those foods. So you don't get those years back when you were struggling to get out of the house. You know, those precious years are gone for you.
Yeah, I've often thought of this in regards to, I wish I knew then what I know now. But having said that, if I hadn't have gone through these things, if I didn't have issues in my mid to late 20s with the foods that I was, or non-foods that I was consuming, then would I have made a change eventually? Probably not, because I wouldn't have had a reason to. And then I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. So I think, you know, these things I think have happened for a reason. It's unfortunate, but look, this is why we do what we do. It's, you know, I quite often say to people that I felt like I found a secret, and I want to tell the world about my secret. And this secret developed into a passion, and now it's an obsession.
Yeah.
And coming back to a point you made earlier, when you see people, eating certain things or you can clearly see they're suffering with mental health or hormonal issues, you just feel like you need to help them. And then that is an awkward conversation because it quite often leads, to them not speaking to you again, especially when it comes to friends and family. But I don't know about you, but I feel obligated as if it's my duty to at least educate people, because I think that's important. All I want to do is arm them with the knowledge so
Yeah.
they can make an educated decision, because what we see in mainstream media and on social media in regards to what we are told is healthy, it's all back to front, it's upside down.
Yeah.
And I think just that knowledge, giving somebody that information is enough for them to change their
I
life.
think sometimes you can get that sort of pushback from people at the beginning because they don't want to hear it, or it's so against what we've been told. But I think sometimes you've sown a seed. If you ever had that, we've definitely had that, where you've sort of said to somebody and you get kind of a negative reaction and you think, oh well. But actually it's gone in, and that they have listened, and because nothing else has ever worked, like your guy with the ulcerative colitis, people are willing think, oh well, it is worth giving it a go. So I think you can get people coming back to you after a while.
Yeah, it's. I think you're right. You plant the seed,
Yeah.
and then you watch it grow, and then occasionally you just water the seed a little, And I think that's the best way. But look, leading by example. If everybody within this space appears to be fit and healthy, and we see huge recoveries, if you like, in regards to certain conditions, things that we had deemed, that we've,
Chronic.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and even terminal. So there's another paper, isn't there, that's just come out in the last few days on brain tumors, glioblastoma. Did you see that one with keto? And they just did a trial basically, and um the people that stuck with it had massively longer survival and fantastic sort of improvements compared to people who couldn't stick to it. So
Mm.
that was interesting, and that's basically a terminal diagnosis when you get that diagnosis.
Well, it's similar to our good friend Andrew Scarborough.
It's actually it's the same condition, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, was he given, I think, 3 months, and 11 years later, he's still going strong. It's
Yeah.
I looked at my stats recently, and since I've been doing this, I've worked with well over 1,000 clients directly, and every one of them that has stuck to the advice has either seen a massive improvement or complete resolution. And then we've got the others who haven't stuck to it, unfortunately. But it's
And
you
they're
know what?
they're my people because usually they've got that food addiction problem, so that when they slip, they go just like a person with an alcohol problem. They can't just slip up and go, oh well, I'll go back to it. They really go way back down again, and usually it's harder the next time even to give those foods up. And yeah, so I really sympathize with that. But I mean, we just have to understand it as an addiction, treat it as an addiction. So how do you treat addictions? Abstinence from drug foods. And so the treatment is a really clean, either low carbohydrate, depending, where people have kind of got to on the spectrum. Clean, low carbohydrate, clean keto, or some people carnivore if that's what works for them and what they choose to do. But then, being absolutely kind of obsessional about that, and being part of a community, which we talked about, which makes all the difference, so they don't feel like the kind of weird one in the family because
Yeah,
they're
that's
having
me.
to eat this way, and everyone kind of around you is kind of saying that's a bit weird. No, you need your community of people who are trying to achieve that same thing, who are saying, we're eating like this, come on, you can do it, you have to do it. Basically, it's kind of life-saving for some of us. So yeah, it's that community ongoing support. It it really is a lifelong, once you've got that food addiction problem, that's a lifelong condition, like all these other lifelong conditions. And if you stop with that abstinence, then you go straight back.
Yeah.
um and probably worse, exactly like any other addiction. That's how it looks in the brain. It's exactly how we behave like it's an addiction. We do all those things that addicts do: lying, sneaking, over consuming, giving up other things in life to focus on the food. It's exactly like
Yeah.
any other addiction, basically.
It's funny you should say that, because I have fallen off the wagon more times than I care to remember. I think when people look at you and I and other people within the space, they think that it's just been this magical transformation. It's been a series of incremental changes and lots of mini battles. I remember, when the cravings would get the better of me, I would raid the cupboard. I would eat anything that contained sugar or, so that would be any form of carbohydrate. And then you've got a problem when you take the wrappers and you hide them at the bottom of the bin. When you do it,
so your family don't know you've done it.
Yeah, you've got a problem.
Exactly. Or you drive off in the car and go and do it, sitting in a car park somewhere because you don't want the family. Exactly. Just like
I've been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, me too. And like you say, yeah, that over the sort of years, under certain circumstances, those kinds of things can happen. But you do just have to pick yourself up, learn from it, and move on. But it's definitely not, we're all talking about it. And on the whole, we've got to a place where we can keep to it 99% of the time. But that is a journey, and it does require keep getting up, dusting yourself off and going again.
Yeah, it's exactly that. But I think, this is where the communities, as you mentioned, come in handy. I've got a private school group which I run with Stephen Thomas. We'll have to get you on. I think if you'd like to come on as a guest at some point. It's a fantastic school group. We've got just under 600 members in there, but we're trying to build this community where people can help each other out. And Stephen and I go live twice in there each week for Q&A. And we're looking at putting in a third. So if you'd like to come in as a special guest, but I mean, those communities are essential. But
I might join. I might be in the community.
Perfect.
Maybe. Yeah.
Appreciate it. I'll send you a link.
Great.
You can be an honorary member. But you also have these communities, and you help people with food addiction. You do a number of conferences, a very successful one last year, and you have another one this year, I believe.
Yes, so we're going bigger and better this year. So last year was the first international food addiction consensus conference, where we were launching this consensus that we'd developed alongside about 40 researchers and clinicians working in the space to say, this is what we all think this condition is, and it should be recognized, and that will lead to more treatments and so on. So that was last year. So this year, the 4th and 5th of September, again in London at the Royal College of General Practitioners, we've got the conference again. You can live stream, but obviously we hope that people will come. We've got some great people coming. So we've got Carlos Montero, who's the guy who originated the Nova system for classifying foods and ultra processed foods. So he's coming to talk. David's going to talk about this issue. So it's basically if you've got food addiction, you're 6 or 7 times more likely to be a type 2 diabetic. So really every healthcare professional needs to understand, how do you recognize it? And then, how do you work with people with food addiction, or where do you pass them on to? How do you deal with people with food addiction, basically? So he's going to be talking about that as well. We've actually, on the cancer side, so we're doing comorbidities this year. So it's food addiction, but also the conditions that come along with it. So obesity, we've got Trocalagian coming over from the States, and he's just published that amazing paper, which is basically showing that keto low carb is better than Ozempic, because you're getting, just as good results, and you don't have all those side effects and kind of, bounce back afterwards. So we've got Tro coming over, David talking about type 2. We've got Nasha Winters. I don't know if you've come across her. She had a terminal cancer diagnosis as a teenager, and is now a really amazing kind of, cancer doctor, holistic, but mostly talking about the food and the impact that that has on cancer. So she's going to be talking about that. We've got Karen Thompson as well from the States, and she's in the past she lived in South Africa, and she worked with Tim Noakes, and they set up a residential treatment for people with sugar addiction. So she's coming over talking about her own journey, sugar addiction journey. Got Nicole Avina, who's very well known in the food addiction space. Who else? Yeah, good. We've got Georgia Eid, the lovely Georgia Eid, speaking this year. So yeah, it should be really good.
Excellent. So we will put all of those links below. Sounds fantastic. Yeah, if I'm available, I'll be there to come and support. So it sounds like a fantastic event. If there's anything I can do to help promote that also, obviously we'll get you into the school group. We'll get you on a live if you're up for that one Sunday, and we can promote it through there.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I hope people will come. Again, it's that community, isn't it? It's not the same as watching it at home. Come and meet
100%.
Get your book signed and ask your questions live.
And it's meeting these people that you see on social media. It's a fantastic opportunity, I think, to meet these people that you see in these podcasts and who release these presentations. It's an opportunity to pick their brains, isn't it? And be around, these like-minded people. I think there's a lot to be said for the community and being together. Streaming just isn't the same. I mean, what you and I are doing now is fantastic, but in person, so much better. So much better.
Definitely.
Fantastic. Jen, I'm conscious of your time because I know you have another call you need to get on. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off? I think
that's it, really, isn't it?
Well, we could go on for hours, but it's and I'm sure we could quite comfortably. Jen, what are the links that we can put out to people in regards to this, and where else can people find you and the work that you do?
Right. So I hang around on X as at Dr. Dr. Jen Unwin, all one word. And the website is, so the charity that I'm linked with now is called the Collaborative Health Community. So it's www.the-chc.org. And if you want to find me, it's /FAS for Food Addiction Solutions. And there'll be stuff there about the conference. There's videos from last year that I think are freely accessible now. So if you want to watch last year's presentations, people can go ahead and do that. And anything else we're going to get up to will be on that website. But I'll send you the links.
Fantastic. So I will pop all of those links below, and we will get you on these lives, and we'll get you in the school group to help you to promote those. But Jen, fantastic chatting as always. Thanks again.
Thank you. See you next time.